Hello, I'm Die Oog. I coordinate the bird ringing scheme for Southern Africa called SAFRING, and it's based at the Animal Demography Unit at the University of Cape Town. Much of my ringing work is focused on studying weavers, but of course I also enjoy ringing any other species. In this presentation, I'm going to tell you about weavers in general, and then some of my studies at Die Oog, which I've been conducting for the last few years. My apologies for not being here tonight. I'm out ringing weavers in the Seychelles. Most weavers, at least the males, are colourful. There are about 120 species of weavers globally. Weavers are found in sub-Saharan Africa through to Southern Asia and the Indian Ocean islands. There is a higher diversity of species near the tropics, and Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania have the highest number of weavers of any countries. The male Cape weaver is a bright yellow colour with a pale eye and black beak. In the non-breeding season, for a very short time, the feathers molt and the male is slightly more dull coloured. Female Cape weavers and young birds are dull coloured with brown eyes. A small percentage of females have pale eyes while they are breeding, but they are always brown coloured in the winter season. In the Cape weaver, only the male builds the nest using plant material. The male collects green material, either grass blades or long strips from palm trees. The first strand is always the most difficult. It is usually twisted around a twig a few times, and then other strands can be slipped in underneath that. Once the first strands have been started on a twig, the male keeps extending the nest outwards. Eventually, the full structure of the nest is formed simply by weaving long pieces of grass or leaves in and out into the nest from the inside and outside. The male adds a ceiling of grass leaves into the roof of the nest to provide water protection, but the bottom of the nest, as shown here, is very thin. If a female accepts a nest, she puts in a thick pad of lining, feathers and grass seed heads, so that the bottom is well protected as well. Here is a cross-section of a breeding nest, showing the outer structure, the ceiling at the top of the nest, as well as the nest lining, providing waterproofing throughout the nest other than the entrance. Cape weavers use a wide variety of nest sites, but they particularly like exotic trees like eucalyptus, willow trees, and pine trees. But they also nest in reed beds and even sometimes on fences or telephone lines. Cape weavers are colonial, and the males display from their nests while singing to attract females. Females normally only accept green nests, and if after a few days a nest fades, and the male will have to build a new one if it's not accepted by a female. The female Cape weaver does all the hard work of incubating the eggs and raising the chicks. A female lays on average 3 eggs, but sometimes 2. The eggs are light blue without any markings. The chicks are in the nest for nearly 3 weeks, and the female feeds them with insects like caterpillars, grasshoppers, and moths. The nests can be checked if it's done with care and experience, and I go to check the nests week after week till the chicks are large enough to be ringed, and I have often caught weavers again after they have left the nest, showing that the whole process is fine. This is a recently fledged Cape weaver. It can already fly freely, and it was caught in my mist net. The gape flange is the bright yellow fleshy part near the beak, and that will gradually disappear after the chicks have left the nest. While in the nest, the mouth inside is pinkish red and surrounded by these bright yellow gape flanges, which makes it very easy for the female to see where the mouths are and where to place the food. Weaver nests are very useful in the environment, not only for themselves, but also for other birds. Sometimes lesser swamp warblers build their nests underneath Cape weaver nests, and this provides protection from rain as well as obscuring the view from aerial predators like crows. If you shine a torch onto a weaver nest at night, this is what you'd expect to see. A few nests with Cape weavers roosting inside them. But you may also find this. Cape sparrows enjoy using the incredibly well-constructed nests of weavers to sleep in. There is an urban legend that if a female weaver does not like a nest that a male has built, she will break it down in disgust. This is not true. If a female does not like a nest, she will simply move on and look for another one. The male will eventually break a nest down because once it's faded to brown, a female is very unlikely to accept it. The male will then destroy the nest, and so that there is a nest site where you can build a new green nest and try again. In breaking down the nest, the male can tear chunks of material out, as he has done here, and it can be broken down in as little as 20 to 30 minutes. Some farmers think that weavers can predict the height of the coming floods in a breeding season, and the weavers will build the nests at the corresponding height above rivers. This, of course, is not true. Weavers cannot predict what's going to happen in a catchment far away later on in the year. Of course, they do build the nests low over water for protection, and they'll base that on the previous year. But if in the current year there are floods greater than the previous year, the nests will be flooded, and this does unfortunately often happen. Now a little bit more specifically about Cape weavers at Die Oog. The earliest record of a Cape weaver was by a visitor to the Cape in the 1600s, but it was only more than 100 years later that Linnaeus first formally described the Cape weaver, also from the Cape of Good Hope region. Then, of course, there were many records of the Cape weaver in the greater Cape Town area, but the first published record that I could find of the Cape weaver in Bergvliet was in 1980, and at Die Oog specifically in 1984. I'd be very interested if anyone has earlier records. There are several sub-colonies at Die Oog. There's one in the reeds at the northern end. There are nests on the island, and also on the left in the poplar trees, the main colony at the moment, as well as the willow trees around the edge of the lake. In 2013, two students from Scotland studied the Cape weavers in detail at Die Oog, and they discovered some interesting things about collection of nest material by the males. They found that the males that nested in the south part of the colony, marked in red, flew further to collect nest material, but they were longer, they were bigger, and they were also more successful. So they worked harder, but they attracted more females by building more nests. In 2014, the Cape weaver colony in the poplars was joined by a hardydaw, as well as about 10 reed cormorants that all nested very close together. The cormorants, hardidars, and cape weavers all successfully reared chicks in this season. The weaver nests and the leaves, however, received a decent whitewashing from all the cormorant activity. With a team of helpers, I've ringed large numbers of passerines right across the Cape Peninsula, including Robben Island, and also Die Oog in the center of these arrows. Ringing at these different sites shows movements, especially of cape weavers, and the longest movements have been from Milnerton of a cape weaver moving to Die Oog, also one from Ottery, and also birds from Die Oog moving away and being recaptured later at other sites as far away as Clovelly, Kommetjie, and Sandvlei. Some weavers, of course, stay at Die Oog for years on end. Many of the cape weavers at Die Oog have been colour-ringed. This means that the weavers can be identified individually without recapturing them. I started colour-ringing in 2013, and some of the weavers are still around. If you can take photos of any weavers in your garden or at Die Oog with colourings so that all the colours are visible, and submit them to SAFRING, we will send you a report about the history of the bird. This helps track the longevity and site fidelity of these weavers at Die Oog, and so will be really useful. If you have taken a photo of a colour-ringed weaver, or in fact if you found a dead bird with a ring, please report it to our website. You can Google SAFRING to find the web page, and then go to Found a Ringed Bird and follow the steps in filling in the date, the place, the ring number, and other details. For colour-ringed birds, you can also submit the photo. You won't know the ring number, but you can add the colouring details, and we will eventually send a report to you about the history of the bird. If you struggle with the web page, you can always just look up our email address and email all the details to us. We need the date and the place, and the ring number or the colouring combinations. PHOWN, which stands for Photos of Weaver Nests, is one of the ADU's virtual museum projects. In this project, we ask people to take photos and record the date and locality of various animals or plants, and including this project on the weaver nests. By submitting the photos, we can learn about the distributions of birds, and in the case of PHOWN, we can also learn about colony sizes, breeding seasonality, and many other aspects. So if you enjoy taking photos, please Google PHOWN or Virtual Museum, and there is a help guide on how to submit records, and you'll be contributing to a very valuable project. Thanks to all the ringing helpers, especially Barry and Sue Schultz, and also to Barry for helping set up this presentation.